Hey everyone, welcome back to the video, and this is now, what if Bosnia and Herzegovina formed an empire? So first, what they would do is try to have their population full of Bosniaks. So first, they would have to go into a civil war. So, looking at the map, the Croats are mostly in the water. I mean, not in the water, but near the water. And then the Bosniaks are just everywhere else, while the Serbs are mostly predominant in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So so they're mostly around like here and here. And I mean, looking at the map, it looks like that Bosnia wouldn't be able to hold them off. So they decide to form an alliance with Croatia, helping them get rid of the Serbs. So they declare war on Serbia. Okay. So they declare war on Serbia, trying to invade their territory and getting their ethnic groups out. So Croatia would make the first move and invading them from the top. And then they start entering their land, and let me just make this darker and then for wouldn't to get confused. Okay, so here are the Serbs in the green, the Bosniaks in the red, and the Croats in the blue, right here. So with this, they enter Serbia in the north, while the Serbs would enter Bosnia and Herzegovina, trying to connect their territories. And that's what they do. They connect with both their parts. So they would try to retreat into their own territory. This part manages to go through, but then this part gets cut off as the Bosnian tries to cut off from the Serbs, which makes this part go out. And then Bosnia sends any alliance request to, they're already in an alliance, but they ask Croatia that after the war they could pull out their people out of their country. So then Croatia reluctantly accepts it, as they are getting rid of Serbia. And then Kosovo decides to join as any alliance into Bosnia. So because of that, they start advancing. Kosovo wants to be an independent country, but Serbia won't allow them to be. So Kosovo decides to join, but they are threatening Belgrade. But as the Serbians are kicked out of Bosnia and Herzegovina, they would try to hold back Kosovo and also try to hold back their capital from being overtaken. So they decided to take over. They start to do any counterattack into their northern territory, and then they kick back the Kosovos out, and then they start an invasion into Kosovo, which makes Albania join the war on the favor of Kosovo. So with the Albanian troops, the Serbians are still stronger, but they are able to do any slow advance, and then eventually capitulate in Kosovo. And then they start going into Albania. But while that's happening, Bosnia starts to go out and invade, eventually going up to Kosovo, liberating a little bit. While that's happening, they're able to make their front line more bigger, eventually taking over Belgrade without the Serbians' notice. And then eventually all troops are pulled out in Albania, then Kosovo, which makes them go back, and then eventually Serbia capitulates. So let's look at the peace treaty. So looking at this peace treaty, Croatia pulled out their people back into Croatia, and Serbia got split into three, with the Kosovo getting the southern part and their independence, now getting recognized by more countries. Bosnia gets the middle part of Serbia, while Croatia gets the northern part. So with this, Bosnia could attack Romania, but Romania is stronger than Bosnia, so they decide to go south and declare war on Montenegro. So Bosnian troops would just enter Montenegro with ease, and then Kosovo decides to join on the aid of Montenegro. So, but then they didn't realize that they're also on the border with Kosovo. So then they are just invading them both. And then they're very close to capitulating. Eventually Montenegro surrenders, and so does Kosovo. And Albania didn't come in to help them, even though that they are an ally of Kosovo. They still didn't join in because they're still recovering from their war with Serbia. So with Albania not joining the war, they would able to kick the Kosovos and Montenegros out of their country. And then now let's look at the peace treaty. So here we see the peace treaty, and Bosnia annexes Kosovo's claims, including Kosovo itself, and also annexing Montenegro. So they decide to invade one more country in the south and start to look up north. And then they would try to invade North Macedonia. And then North Macedonia has been expecting this, so they have their troops fully mobilized, and they start invading into the southern part. But then it's stalemated, and then eventually they're kicked back. And then eventually they start their own invasion into North Macedonia. And then eventually, after a few battles, they surrender. So let's look at the peace treaty. So here we see full annexation of North Macedonia, and now Bosnia starts to look north and it declares war on Croatia and Slovenia. And now, realizing that the Croats could do any encirclement right here, they decide to go for their southern part. And then that goes very well. And then eventually they lose all their coastal land and they start invading from the north. And then eventually Croatia surrenders. Next, with Slovenia alone, they also surrender. So now let's look at the peace treaty with this very short war. So here we see the return of Yugoslavia, but Bosnia decides to invade more because they think that this is not enough. So they declare war on Albania, trying to get more coastal border. So they invade Albania on all sides, and then eventually Albania's capital is taken and then surrendered. with this, Bulgaria decides to join, but they joined a little bit too late. So, Bosnian troops were able to align their border with Bulgaria. And then, the next thing you know, Bulgaria's capital was captured. And then eventually, Bulgaria surrenders. Next, Greece decides to join. But also, again, very late. So, with Greece into the war, they would be able to put up a good fight, because they are able to liberate a little bit of Albania and a little bit of Bulgaria. And then they would try to go for their coastal border, but then Greece decides to encircle them and then wiping them out. Next, Greece would be able to kick out the Bosnians out of the Bulgarian coast, eventually meeting up with close to the Romanian capital. And then they do manage to do a good amount of liberation in Bulgaria, but then eventually that goes to a stalemate. Next, they go over to Albania. They do liberate their capital, and then another stalemate is held. So now Bosnia decides to invade in the south, trying to connect to their front line, and then they cut to Greece in half, and then another. And then the Bosnians decide to take over Albania again, and then take out this panhandle of Greece, officially connecting up with Turkey, encircling this part, wiping them out. And now this part is starting to lose ground, but they are putting up a good fight. And then eventually, they are kicked out and wiped out. So, Greece decides to ask Bosnia for peace. So, Bosnia agrees to the peace conference, and that will be held in Istanbul. So, looking at this peace treaty, Greece got kinda destroyed. So Bosnia annexed all of Albania, the northern part of Bulgaria, while the southern part of Bulgaria and the Greek panhandle will be into a puppet state. Now, Greece would have to either merge with another country or try very hard to keep its economy alive, and Bosnia decides to, either invading more countries or they decide to stop. And what they decide to do? Invade more countries. So they declare war on Austria. And this adds to a chain reaction, making Hungary join. And because Hungary joined, Slovakia had to join. And because Slovakia joined, the Czech Republic had to join. So, it's either Bosnia versus these four. So, with the four countries uniting, not into a country, but uniting their armies, they would start to have a good attack into Bosnian territory, eventually into one big front line, and then about to enter the Bosnian mainland, somewhere around here. So, the Bosnian troops would try their best to get back into the northern part of their territory, officially going into Serbia. But then soon they're met with the Bosnians right here, so they're into a stalemate. So then, a few months later, they managed to do a counterattack, pushing them back into the Hungarian border. Next, they would try to invade the Hungarian land, but they also go into a stalemate. But they are able to push back them back into their own territory, gaining more coastal area, getting back Slovenia, and then eventually they're all kicked out. And now they have to start an invasion back, and then eventually Budapest is captured. And then next, Hungary surrenders. With this, they have a very good advantage because Vienna is right here. I don't know exactly where Slovakia's capital is, but I don't know what part, but I'm guessing somewhere around here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but Vienna's right here and Prague's right here. So, with Hungary surrendering, they managed to already capture Vienna, and then eventually cutting Austria into two. This part falls over, and Austria surrenders. So the Bosnian troops go up to Prague, threatening the city, and then Slovakia's capital is also getting threatened. And then eventually, without their capitals being captured, they both surrender and ask for peace. So let's look at the peace treaty. So here's the peace treaty between the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Austria, and Hungary. So here we see the Austrian panhandle into a puppet state as a border, as a buffer zone between Switzerland, Liechtenstein, and a little bit of Germany right here. And in the north, we have the Czechoslovakian buffer zone between Poland, Germany, and Bosnia and Herzegovina. So, in total, this is the land gain of what Bosnia has, and the three buffer zones between the countries. So, but Bosnia thinks that this doesn't look good. So, they decided to go for one more war, and that is with Romania. So, with Bosnian troops already at the border of Bucharest, they decided to, they would predict that the Romanians are already here, so they would already go more advancements into their northern territory. And then that goes very well. But with the Romanians retreating to the north, they're able to start an invasion into the south, eventually capturing all their coastal areas. They are able to push back a little bit, eventually meeting back to the border, splitting them into two. But then eventually they're into a stalemate, and then eventually the invasion into Bucharest begins. And then Bucharest is eventually captured, and then with a few more weeks of fighting, Romania decides to ask for peace, and then eventually they surrender. So let's look at the peace treaty. Here's another peace treaty with Romania. Basically, they get all of their coast and most of their territory, but then Bosnia decides to interact with one more country, and that's with Moldova. They send an ultimatum over to Moldova saying that they don't want to fight, but all they need is their territory. So, Moldova would, if Moldova denies this ultimatum, Bosnia would go to war with Moldova, and either way, Moldova would get destroyed. So, Moldova decides to go in, but as a puppet. And then eventually, the Romanian puppet would annex with the Moldovan puppet. Then, this is the area of Bosnia and Herzegovina Empire. Hopefully y'all liked the video, and I'll see y'all in the next one.